Hey y'all, and welcome to Politibrawl. My name is Brian, and Donald Trump was completely right in picking Marco Rubio to be the next Secretary of State because he goes toe-to-toe with George Stephanopoulos and hits a home run every single time. Let's dive in.
Even some of your Republican allies are puzzled by the steps that President Trump has taken to placate Vladimir Putin. I want to bring up a post that Lisa Murkowski.
Well, which ones? What steps has the president taken to placate?
Let me show you. Let me show you what.
Are we arming the Russians? Are we providing economic assistance to the Russians? Have we given the Russians $180 billion?
Please let me ask you a question. This is Lisa Murkowski, and here's what she says. This week started with administration officials refusing to acknowledge that Russia started the war in Ukraine. It ends with a tense and shocking conversation in the Oval Office and whispers from the White House that they may try to end all U.S. support for Ukraine. I know foreign policy is not for the faint of heart, but right now I am sick to my stomach as the administration appears to be walking away from our allies and embracing Putin, a threat to democracy and U.S. values around the world. Those are not my words. That's Senator Lisa Murkowski. What's your response?
Well, yeah, we're a free country. People have a right to these opinions. I would just say to you, what have we done to placate the Russians? The only thing we've done is say, are you guys willing to talk about peace? I say the same point. We're not giving that. We haven't given.
You voted with North Korea and Russia and you voted with North Korea and Russia and Belarus in the United Nations and against our Western allies.
No, let me tell you. All right. So do you know what the United Nations resolution was? I'll tell you if you want to hear what it was. It basically said this has been a horrible war. It's time for it to end. The job of the UN is to bring about peace in the world. I thought that's what the UN was created to do, to stop wars and to prevent them. And that's what the resolution did. Was it antagonistic towards the Russians? No. Back to the point. But it also didn't praise the Russians. All it said is, this is a bad war. It needs to end. And by the way, at the Security Council, which has not been widely reported, the first resolution on Ukraine that has passed the Security Council in 3 years passed this week because of the leadership of President Trump. And it's a resolution that says, bad war needs to end. Let's bring the two sides together. That's what the resolution is. Again, what is the United Nations for? Isn't it not a forum to promote peace in the world? And shouldn't our president, shouldn't we all be happy that we have a president who's trying to stop wars and prevent them instead of start them? And I just don't get it. I really don't, other than the fact that it's Donald J. Trump. If this was a Democrat that was doing this, everyone would be saying, well, he's on his way to the Nobel Peace Prize. This is absurd. We are trying to end a war. You cannot end a war unless both sides come to the table, starting with the Russians. And that is the point the president has made. And we have to do whatever we can to try to bring them to the table to see if it's even possible. I'm not promising you it's possible. I'm not telling you it's 90% likely. I'm saying it's 0% likely if we don't get them to a negotiating table. And the sooner everyone grows up around here and figures out that this is a bad war that's heading in a bad direction with death and destruction and all kinds of dangers surrounding it that could spiral into a broader conflict, the sooner people grow up and realize that, I think the more progress we're going to be able to make. But the president's crystal clear. He campaigned on it, and he's going to govern on it. And that is, he is going to be a president that tries to achieve peace, and he has been very clear this is a war that would have never happened had Donald Trump been in the White House, and it needs to end, and we're going to do everything we can to end it in an enduring and sustainable and fair way.
You said in your confirmation hearings that Russia will have to make concessions to get a peace deal. What concessions do you expect them to make?
Well, why would I say that on a news broadcast? That's what negotiations are about. That's the problem here. Again, this is not a messaging exercise, okay? This is, can they get to a table? And then there's hard work to be done. You're absolutely right. I'm not telling you this is an easy peace deal. The Russians will give you a 30-minute lecture on the history of Ukraine and this, that, and the other. The Ukrainians have their own point of view. There's no doubt about it. But what peace deal in the history of the world has ever been easy? That's the hard work of diplomacy. That's exactly what the vice president was alluding to. That's what peace deals involve. You've covered this. You've been around for a long time. These conflicts are not easy to solve. But you can't solve them at all if you don't even have a process to try to solve it, if you don't have the parties at the table. And right now, that's been our goal. It's been explained crystal clear to the Ukrainians and the Europeans and everyone else who wants to know for weeks now. And the only thing they were told is, do not do things to derail it. And sadly, President Zelensky, couldn't contain himself in that regard. I hope this could all be reset. I hope he comes to the realization that we're actually trying to help his country here before it suffers thousands of more casualties. 3 million people have already left Ukraine. Are they ever going to be able to come back? He's got Ukrainians being held prisoner, including children, on the Russian side. Why is any of this good for anybody? And the argument that we're going to just keep it going forever, that's absurd.
What's the point of having a UN if there is no clear communication between both the Ukrainian and Russian governments? What's the point of the UN if you don't really believe in what they have to offer? What is the point of the UN when, let's be honest here, there is a bigger issue going on, and that is trying to figure out the oil rights, the mineral rights, who actually should be in control of the Donbass regions? Because let's be honest, Zelensky, in that regard, has not been really good to not only his own people, but to people of Russian descent who are livid at the Ukrainian government and are just ecstatic that the Russians have come in and liberated them. Who is looking out for the people in that border region? Okay? That's what the UN is supposed to do, and they're never good at this. Their whole point and purpose is to sing Kumbaya and send people over into the Congo and never look up what happened when the UN went into the Congo, okay? They're not good at that job. So ultimately, they're nothing more than a resolution-passing group of people that says, give peace a chance without ever really, taking on the mantle of the consequences of those actions. And furthermore, when it comes to the UN and resolutions, the Assembly first approved the Ukrainian resolution, which demands an immediate withdrawal of Russian troops and calls Moscow's aggression a violation of the UN Charter. The vote was 93 to 18 with 65 abstentions. The result showed some diminished support for Ukraine because previous assembly votes saw more than 140 nations condemn Russia's aggression and demand an immediate withdrawal. That tells me that the world is starting to sour on Ukraine. Furthermore, the Assembly then considers the U.S. drafted resolution, which acknowledges the tragic loss of life throughout the Russia-Ukraine conflict, and implores a swift end to the conflict and further urges a lasting peace between Ukraine and Russia. But it never mentions Moscow's aggression. Forget that last little tidbit in there, which is nothing more than, let's be honest, NPR trying to make a dig at President Trump. Because let's be further honest, NPR is likely going to get fully defunded and cut off from the federal government here within the next year or so. Doge, please do it. So ultimately, the whole point of me quoting that is the world is starting to sour on the Ukraine situation. And Marco Rubio is pointing out that, hey, as long as you continue to be really stubborn and refuse to look at potential negotiations and refuse to further admit that, hey, maybe Ukraine might be one of the most corrupt nations in all of Europe and needs a deeper look, then let's be honest here, the UN is nothing but being loud, obnoxious twerps that really can't do anything. It's like that really annoying kid at lunch that no one wants to be friends with at this point, and everyone's trying to avoid them as best they can. But there's a bigger problem going on, at least in terms of American politics. Right at the beginning, Stephanopoulos brought up Lisa Murkowski. Now, there are a couple of squishy Republicans that I can understand. For instance, Susan Collins. She's from Maine. Maine is a mostly Democrat state. She's sort of governing between a rock and a hard place, so she has to be very careful with her rhetoric. Lisa Murkowski, on the other hand, is a full-blown swamp creature. From Alaska, she got lucky in her last election because of ranked choice voting, and then because there are so many military installations in Alaska, because Anchorage is one of the most important airports in the world from a military perspective. And furthermore, let's be real here, we have a whole bunch of nuclear missile silos because that's the fastest way you can get a launch over the North Pole or across Siberia into the former Soviet Union. So yes, the military-industrial complex loves Lisa Murkowski, and she is going to do whatever is required of her to talk up and talk about just how evil Russia is, because they're the big bad boogeyman. And let's be honest, the boogeyman doesn't exist anymore. It didn't exist when we thought it was sleeping under our beds, and it didn't exist after 1991 when the Soviet Union finally collapsed. It doesn't exist anymore. Russia is no longer this worldwide threat to not only democracy, but world trade. Let's be honest, it's been sanctioned so hard that it's been basically tranquilized. It's a tranquilized bear in a cage. And right now, it's been able to reach out, and it's been grabbing a hold of the one thing it can hold on to in Ukraine. And in the words of President Trump, it's time for this war to end. Okay, it is time for these two sides to realize that this border region dispute, these oil and mineral rights disputes, y'all have got to figure this part out. It's likely going to come to a point where Russia starts paying Ukraine for the rest of its existence for the rights to control the Donbass region and Crimea. And Ukraine then also says that they'll never join NATO, sign a resolution along those lines. And Marco Rubio is smart enough not to give the game away because no one should ever talk what they're actually going to do in negotiations with foreign powers, and particularly not talk about them to the press. You don't give away your advantage at any given point. That's negotiation 101. So Marco Rubio handles himself absolutely perfectly, and man, I am loving this pick more and more. I used to joke around that, hey, this is little Marco, his political career's over. Oh no, it's gotten new life, and he knows how to handle himself. He's now in the Secretary of State position, and he is doing a fantastic job furthering the interests of the United States and maybe, just maybe, helping to create a lasting peace between the warring nations of Russia and Ukraine. Folks, my name is Brian. Hope you enjoyed that segment here on Politibrawl. Don't forget to like and subscribe. Catch you on the next one. Until then, y'all have a good